There are moments in life that seem harmless, until you realize someone is watching you. There are neighbors who appear friendly, until you hear them standing outside your door at midnight whispering things you wish you didn't understand. In today's video, you'll hear 3 true stories told by those who once faced silent fear, unseen darkness, and people who no longer belong to the ordinary world. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and listen closely. Because one day, you might become the main character in your very own story. Story 1. The Neighbor in the Dark. I bought a small mobile home 2 months ago. It was old, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny living room, a little kitchen, and a single bathroom. But for me, it was a place to escape the city, to forget about work, and to find a bit of peace. The land was over 2 acres, surrounded by dense forest. What I liked most was that it was only a 10-minute drive from a ski slope. I planned to use it as a private getaway, maybe just for myself or someday for me and a girlfriend if I ever got lucky. When I first moved in, I came with my parents and younger brother. We brought furniture, bought a sofa, laid down rugs, and set up the internet. That same day, a man from the house next door came over. He introduced himself as Dale, around 50, tall and thin, with heavy eyes like he hadn't slept in days. He spoke with a thick mountain accent, strange sounding to a city guy like me. He made small talk, asked a few questions, but what really unsettled me was he stayed and watched us the entire afternoon. He didn't take his eyes off us. When we said goodbye, he only asked one thing: "You gonna be out here alone?" 2 weeks later, I came back by myself. I brought my snowboard and planned to stay a few nights. Less than 15 minutes after I arrived, Dale showed up at my door. He didn't knock, didn't wait. He just walked right in with a crooked smile. "Saw your car. Figured I'd come say hey." I tried to be polite and invited him to sit. We talked a bit. Then Dale asked if I wanted to come over for a beer. I agreed, partly to keep things friendly, partly out of curiosity. His house was also a mobile home, older, darker. There were a few Heinekens on the table. We sat on the porch. Dale said he'd been living there for over 20 years, but the more he talked, the more agitated he seemed. "I hate city people. You folks come out here, cut down trees, dump trash, ruin this land." I tried to explain I just wanted to escape the city, find some peace. But he wasn't listening. He slammed his beer can on the table and growled, "I don't get why your kind can't just stay where you belong." I stood up and forced a smile. "Thanks for the beer. I should head back." Dale said nothing, just stared at his clenched hands. That night, I lay alone on my mattress, watching a movie on my laptop. Close to midnight, I heard something. A whisper outside. A man's voice cursing under his breath like he was muttering to himself. I paused. The movie sat up and looked out the window. Nothing. Just trees and darkness. The next morning, Dale knocked on my door. I didn't answer. He kept knocking for over 5 minutes. Then he yelled, "I know you're in there. Your car's still outside." I stood frozen. My heart felt like it was thudding just beneath my skin. That evening, I opened the door to get some air. The moment I turned on the porch light, I saw Dale. He was standing about 5 meters from the woods, arms limp at his sides, staring with a blank expression. Then in an instant, he turned and bolted straight into the trees. I called my dad. He told me not to call the cops. "Once you call the police on a neighbor, you'll never live peacefully there again." I couldn't sleep that night. Around 1 a.m., Dale came back. This time he was screaming outside my house like a madman. "I know you're listening. Get the hell out of here. Nobody wants you in this place." I turned on the light, but saw no one. Just a shadow darting into the forest, vanishing into the dark. The next morning, I packed my things and left. As I locked the door, I noticed a rusty knife stabbed into the tree beside the porch. On the handle, scratched crudely with a nail, were the words, "Sleep, I'm waiting." I haven't gone back since. And if I ever do, I will never go back alone. Story 2. The Knock After Midnight. I don't remember much about that night. I was only 7 years old. But my mother, she remembers every detail as if it happened just yesterday. Back then we lived in a poor neighborhood, the kind where nights came without the sound of crickets, only police sirens and hurried footsteps. Dad was often away on long work trips, so most of the time it was just Mom and us 3 kids at home. That night it was colder than usual. My mom said she was asleep when she suddenly heard knocking. Light, steady, and strange, like someone tapping deliberately with their fingertips, trying not to make noise. She thought it was some neighborhood kids playing around, so she peeked through the blinds and went back to bed. But half an hour later, there was knocking again. This time, from the back of the house. No one would go all the way back there just for a prank. She didn't wake us. Instead, she quietly went to the kitchen and pulled out Dad's shotgun from under the cabinet. She turned off all the lights and sat silently in the living room where she could see every entrance. Then came the knocking again. 3 knocks, firm. She tiptoed to the kitchen window and gently pulled the curtain aside. No one there. But there was a smudge on the glass like a dirty handprint. A small one. That's when she began to tremble. But my mom isn't weak. She shouted, "I have a gun. Back away from my house or I'll shoot silence." Then, the sound of footsteps sprinting quickly along the side of the house. It took over an hour for the police to arrive. When they searched around the front porch, they found something that made my mother go pale. A length of barbed wire over a meter long, twisted tightly at both ends like a noose. It was lying right by the front door, tucked against the wall. When asked, she said with certainty it wasn't hers. One officer looked at her and said, "If you'd open that door, we might be investigating a murder scene right now." But it didn't end there. When they inspected the rest of the house, they found pry marks on the window of my room and smears of mud trailing up the sill. Someone had tried to break in. The next day, my mom noticed the neighbor across the street, a man who lived alone, standing inside his house, slightly pulling back the curtain, staring directly at ours. No blinking, no expression, just staring. She said he'd done that before many times, especially when Dad was away. But she'd never had any proof, never a solid reason to call the police. That very week, she decided to sell the house. We moved out immediately after. I still don't remember much about that night. But sometimes in my dreams, I hear 3 soft knocks and see a dirty handprint pressed against my bedroom window. Story 3. The Man in the Garage. There's one thing I never thought I'd admit: I actually miss my old neighbors, loud, annoying. But at least they were normal. It all started when a silver gray van showed up next door. No moving trucks, no chatter. No one saw anyone move in. My wife and I decided to go over and say hi. But no matter how many times we knocked or rang the bell, no one answered. The van stayed parked there for an entire week. The house had a detached garage out back. The first time we heard it open was close to 11 p.m. A dim yellow sensor light flicked on, revealing a tall man, white shirt, jeans, carrying boxes from the van into the garage. We peeked through the curtains. But when he paused and looked directly at our window, something felt wrong. He wasn't surprised, wasn't startled. He just stared, unblinking. I backed away from the window. Seconds later, the garage door slammed shut. I tried to approach him a few days later, but every time I stepped outside, he'd vanish, always just before I got close, like he was avoiding me, or playing some kind of game. One night when the garage lights came on, I went out back to get a better look. As I got closer to the door, I heard a faint sound inside. Then 3 knocks. Not loud, not urgent, but deliberate. I tried the handle, it was locked. My wife called me back from the window. I acted like nothing happened and returned to bed. But I couldn't sleep all night. At dawn, my wife shook me awake and whispered, "I heard the back gate open. Someone's in the yard." I rushed downstairs and flipped on the outside light. The gate was wide open. I heard footsteps dart along the side of the house, then the sound of the gate slamming shut. I ran outside but saw no one. Only a single muddy footprint, leading from our yard to the neighbor's garage. The next morning, I spoke to my neighbor Gene. He said he also heard something strange the night before, like someone crying, but with their mouth covered. That evening, my wife Jean and I went over and knocked again. No one answered, but from inside we heard a loud crash like something heavy slammed against the wall. The next day, the van was gone, and the man never returned. But for the past 3 nights, I've been waking up at the exact same time, 3:16 a.m. And from the back of the house, I hear a faint dragging sound, like metal scraping against concrete. Each time I go to check, there's nothing there. But this morning, I found a small patch of mud on the kitchen floor. The back door was still locked, but the kitchen curtain had been shifted as if someone had just peeked inside. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost or some supernatural creature. It's the neighbor right next door with a hollow smile and eyes staring through your curtain at 2 a.m. Thank you for listening until the end. If you've ever experienced something strange or have a story that kept you up at night, share it in the comments. And if you think this video deserves it, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next chilling tale. Your name might be the one we tell next week. Sleep well, if you dare.